Chapter 2, Rear Derailleur Limit Screws.
In this segment, we're going to talk about what the limit screws are on the rear derailleur and how they should be set.
We will discuss the location and function of the guide pulley, the function of the high and low limit screws. You'll see some examples of improperly set limit screws, how to adjust them, and you'll see that this is going to be illustrated in a way that I think you'll find interesting and pleasing.
Here we see the chain coming from the front derailleur, going around the tension pulley here, and then under the guide pulley, and the guide pulley is guiding the chain onto the cog, which is right above it. And here we can see the exact same thing from the other side of the bike. Let's see what happens in the rear wheel with the rear derailleur and the gears when I shift the rear derailleur. One click. One click. Notice that the guide pulley has moved over, and as I start to pedal, the guide pulley now positions the chain under the second cog. Of course, I can be pedaling while I'm doing the same thing. Now let's see what happens when I release the rear derailleur. One click. By releasing a small amount of cable, the guide pulley moves back. So as we shift across the bike like this, the guide pulley positions the chain directly under the cog that we want to be shifting into. From having taught this many times, I've learned that a good way to demonstrate this is by taking out of the bike everything that obscures your view of exactly what's happening with the derailleur and the cassette. So I'm going to take the wheel out and replace it with just a hub with a cassette, and I'm also going to remove the chain. Here I've taken the wheel out of the bike, so all you see is the hub and the cassette, and there's also no chain. And you're going to find that this is going to give us a much better vantage point from which to study exactly what's happening in the rear derailleur. We need to have a good understanding of what the limit screws are. The limit screws on a derailleur define how far the derailleur can physically move outward and inward. There are little screws that I'll show you in a second, and they define that distance there. Notice that I'm moving the derailleur with my fingers. I could also do it by pulling on this exposed cable here and define the limit of travel of the derailleur. I am not using the shifter to determine this. The shifter doesn't even have to be on the bike in order to do this, and there doesn't even have to be a cable, because all I'm doing is measuring the physical movement of the derailleur inside and outside. These are the sometimes mysterious limit screws. This is the high limit screw here. You maybe can see the H on the derailleur. This is the low limit screw here, indicated by the L.
If we look at a close-up of these limit screws and look at this one right here, you see I can use either a Phillips screwdriver or a flat blade screwdriver to adjust the screw. You can use either one. My preference is a flat blade screwdriver because I think it stays engaged in the screw better. Whichever one you use, make sure it's a good quality screwdriver, not one that's all chipped up. And it should fit properly too.
Now the derailleur moves back and forth as it shifts the gears. The high limit screw, this one here, defines how far the derailleur can move in the direction of the high gears. The low limit screw here defines how far the derailleur can physically move in the direction of the low gears. Okay, here I have a problem of the positioning of my high limit screw. This is my highest gear, but look at where the guide pulley is. The guide pulley is right here. The guide pulley is not under the highest gear. It's to the right of it. So my chain is going to be inclined to go down inside the space between the frame of the bike and my highest gear. I'm allowing, because I have an improperly adjusted high limit screw, the guide pulley is allowed to move too far out. You see that? It should be right about there. It's moving out further. But I can remedy that by correctly adjusting my high limit screw. If I turn the high limit screw inward, you'll see that the guide pulley moves over. And I can keep doing this until the guide pulley deposits itself right under there. It is right about there. So now the guide pulley is going to put the chain right where I want it, right on that small gear. And now I've allowed my guide pulley to only move out that far. It can't go out as far as it did just a minute ago. This is also a problem with the high limit screw. Here my guide pulley is not allowed to move out far enough. So even if I try to release the cable fully, the chain will never get put over onto this smallest cog here because the guide pulley is not moving far enough outward to be able to accomplish that. And I can fix that by, in this case, loosening my high limit screw just a little bit. I think you can see why I like to do this without the chain on the bike, because you see very, very clearly exactly what's going on with the guide pulley. So that's the high limit screw.
Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that you have to take the chain off the bike in order to set the limit screws, but I think that when you do as a teaching mechanism, you see much better what's going on.
Supposing I have a situation where everything works perfectly, my gears are moving correctly from one to the other, except that I can't get the bike to shift into the smallest cog even when the cable is fully released. Now that is going to be a high limit screw problem, undoubtedly, because my guide pulley is not coming out far enough. So if I loosen that, now I'm allowing the derailleur to come out a little bit further, and I'm allowing the chain to be deposited on the small cog. Here I have an example of a maladjusted low limit screw, because in the direction of the low gear, the guide pulley is being allowed to move too far, and that creates the possibility of the chain overshifting and getting jammed between the largest cog here and the spokes, and that can be disastrous. So we have to restrict the movement of the derailleur in the direction of the lowest gear. So in this case, I go to my low limit screw, the one marked L, and turn that one in. And as I turn it in, I can periodically just check to see how far the derailleur moves in the direction of the lowest gear. I'm just doing it with my hand. I can pull on the cable also. And I'm going to just move that in, turn that in, until I'm satisfied that the derailleur can't move the guide pulley too far in the direction of the lowest gear. But as I'm doing that adjustment, I want to make sure I don't restrict the inward movement of the derailleur so much that the guide pulley can't get to that largest cog, or I'll never be able to get into my lowest gear. So that also would be a low limit screw adjustment to get it exactly right so it doesn't go too far but goes far enough.
If you have a bike that has internally routed cables, you can't pull on the cable as I showed you, but you can use your hand to move the derailleur back and forth between its range of travel. That's not quite as convenient, but it is effective. This, by the way, is the derailleur hanger. Here's a view from the other side. This particular kind bolts onto the frame. Some types are part of the frame, and this hole here in the derailleur hanger is threaded, and the derailleur bolts on through that threaded portion. Now notice that the derailleur here is perfectly vertical, and so is the hanger. In Chapter 14a, we'll deal with the complications that arise when the derailleur hanger becomes bent.